If you're interested in collecting anime figures or toys in general, you've probably seen the Good Smile Company lawsuit floating around your peripheral vision. If not, hello! The Japanese toy manufacturer known for producing Nendoroid and Figma brands is called Good Smile Company, and they are being accused of owning 4chan. Yes, I am not kidding. I assume this story isn't going to gain much traction in the mainstream because toy collection is a lot more niche than something like video games, but it's something I'm passionate about, and it's my channel, so I'll do what I want. I read through the lawsuit document, and I'm going to go over and simplify it to the best of my ability. I'll leave the link in the description if you want to read it for yourself and draw your own conclusions. Guy Brand and James Young-Sik Kim were ex-employees of Good Smile who were folded into the US side of the company after Good Smile Company bought several of their properties, including the website forfansbyfans.com. As an aside, I have literally never heard a single good thing about For Fans by Fans. Basically, everyone online I have ever spoken to about this website has had nothing but horrible experiences with them, whether from buying or designing for them. In 2020, Good Smile hit the two men with a lawsuit over a breach of contract. While employed at Good Smile Company, these executives had signed non-competes, non-disclosure agreements, and an agreement to refer business opportunities to the figurine company. Good Smile alleges Brand and Kim breached their employment contracts by stealing property, employees, and confidential information. Good Smile asked for $2 million in damages and also fired the employees. Now, currently in 2021, the two men are countersuing Good Smile over a bunch of stuff. One of the things they accused Good Smile of was sales tax evasion, which is most likely true. Most corporations are guilty of some sort of tax fraud, but you'd think that this would have been enough on its own, and that the federal government or whoever would have done a full investigation if it were true. If you read the document, there are a lot of instances of the two men saying, "We really tried to tell them what they were doing was bad and wrong," for basically every single thing they accused Good Smile of. Good Smile was also accused of non-compliance with Federal Trade Commission regulations, because allegedly they did not announce delays because of COVID-19 and didn't want to offer refunds to people who were affected by the delays, as well as pressuring the manufacturers to get shit done on schedule. I mean, this is kind of bullshit, because if you've ordered anything from Japan these last 2 years from websites like AmiAmi or Good Smile, there's tons of warnings plastered all over these websites that stuff is being delayed, and most likely won't ship for another year, and product release dates are uncertain. They didn't even need to announce delays, because every single thing in the world is being delayed. A company not wanting to issue refunds is a no-brainer. No duh, they don't want everyone refunding because they had to wait a few extra months. It's in the company's best interest to hold everyone's pre-orders, but it's not like they actively prevented you from refunding if you wanted your money back. Brand and Kim also accused Good Smile of improper licensing practices. And I don't know if I read this correctly, but it seems that the main complaint is that Good Smile Japan is the headquarters, and they just ship out whatever to the United States branch, and sell it on their store because all the licensing is done in Japan, and they don't bother clearing the licensing in other countries because it's an online shop. I hope I got that right. Is that even illegal? I don't know. The other licensing thing they accuse Good Smile of is that their boss, Ena Hozumi, submitted samples that misrepresented the final product to Viz Media for some Naruto thing to get production approved. And I'm confused because that happens a lot with prototypes and proof of concepts. They don't always represent the final version because they're just tests. They also accuse her of selling goods prior to obtaining the proper approvals, and I just have to ask, selling to whom? It's a common practice to put some toys and figures into production before obtaining the license just to get a head start on the deal you assume is a slam dunk. But Good Smile doesn't put up products on their pages until the license holders agree. So who exactly is she selling these products to? Well, apparently that doesn't matter, because these two heroes told her that the practice was not ethical, could tarnish Good Smile Company's reputation, and potentially subject it to liability.
Isn't that corrupt? Isn't that immoral?
And their boss, Hazumi, was like, lol, okay, whatever. The longest part of the document is obviously the part where they accuse Good Smile of lolicon crimes. And it's written with the sole intent to make Good Smile look
Immoral?
The term lolicon is used incredibly liberally and vaguely throughout this entire document, and at points they use lolicon and sexualized anime character interchangeably. So you know that they're using this to character assassinate their ex-employers. Quote, cross-complainants are informed and believe that the sale of such anime figures may well implicate and/or violate U.S. obscenity laws. At the time, there were no buyer age restrictions on the above websites selling the over-sexualized anime figures. End quote. Okay, so 1. Obscenity laws are bullshit. They're incredibly subjective and basically impossible to enforce unless we do what Australia did and ban anime entirely, which I don't fucking see happening. 2. Good Smile US has their adult figures in the mature section. The images are blurred out, and it clearly says that you need to be 18 to purchase them. These are the standard practices for buying online, because I'm not going to put in my identification card on the internet to buy anime products. But I know that they're not talking about the actual not safe for work statues. They're talking about all the characters that get licensed that are turned into Nendoroids that may have risque clothing. That is how vaguely they use the word lolicon. They could be talking about Dragon Maid Kana, or they could be talking about literally every single female Nendoroid that exists. And thirdly, if your child manages to buy a $300 statue of a sexy lady in a bunny girl costume online without you knowing about it, you are a bad parent. These types of products aren't cheap, and they're not small either. So the only way your parents wouldn't know about this is if you were being severely neglected. Where was I? Oh yeah, right. Quote, cross-complainants are informed and believe that other employees at Good Smile US also complained to their superiors that it was unethical to sell and market lolicon in the US to customers of all ages. End quote. Once again, they are being intentionally vague to make the problem seem worse. Good Smile does not manufacture mature figures themselves. They sell third-party ones on their website, and the actual not safe for work ones have warnings on them. They are not marketed towards minors. Good Smile is a hobbyist website that is used by adults. But more importantly, they are not talking about actual porn statues. They are talking about Nendoroids and Figma that happen to be wearing sexy clothing. You would think, if this was a real concern that they had, they would have brought even a single shred of actual evidence. When they complained to Hazumi, she showed them another website owned by Good Smile Company that exclusively sold not safe for work figures and statues. And the court document made special mention of the ones that featured quote-unquote rape. Because that's how you really get the old biddies to clutch their pearls in court, by mentioning a taboo sex act. Brandon Kim complained endlessly about these sexy anime girls being sold by the company, and Hazumi would direct them to be in constant contact with Lolicon through group chats, figures displayed throughout the workplace, and directions from her to work with the offensive material. I'm still under the assumption that they're using Lolicon to mean sexy anime figures in general, because the scenario is just way too absurd for me to comprehend. Good Smile does not exclusively make lolly figures. They make a very huge variety of things, and sometimes that includes sexy anime chicks. The idea that they were surrounded by lolicon at every turn at work to the point where they were forced to join a lolicon discord for work is fucking lunacy. What I'm getting from this is that they were basically offended that Hazumi expected them to do their fucking jobs. And that raises another issue for me. These two were brought into the company after a merger. How could they possibly have not known about this? Did they not even look up what fucking company was purchasing them? The products that Good Smile sells isn't a secret, which means you clearly weren't that offended by it because you continued to work with them for over a year. If you genuinely thought that what they were selling was child exploitation material, you would have contacted the authorities immediately. But you didn't, because it's not, and you know this. But it makes a great headline, don't it? Speaking of secrets, early on in the document they described the secret sale and distribution of potentially obscene, explicit anime products and merchandise on the US Good Smile website, with lolicon in literal scare quotes. And that would be some really juicy information if it were true, so I scoured the US website and I found nothing. So, after not being able to find a supposed secret under-the-table sale of icky anime products, I went back to reading the document. And way later, it's revealed that after they complained to Hazumi, she very tongue-in-cheek put a link to the Japanese Good Smile website for the more adult products, and called it a secret. Yeah, the more I read this document, the less I trust these guys. So, Hazumi pulled some real queen shit, and basically told them that as long as sexy anime figures keep selling gangbusters, they're gonna keep making them, and that was the final decision. Brandon Kim removed themselves from these apparent mandatory lolicon group chats and were shocked to find out that complaining a lot about the products your company sells, and then removing yourselves from work-related groups that talk about the products you sell means that you're going to be excluded from meetings. And your bosses aren't going to include you in discussions on what is being sold on the website. They talk about how they were excluded from decision-making on what materials would be available for sale on the quote-unquote secret website, but I thought the whole point of that was that they didn't want to be involved with the sale of obscene stuff, so why suddenly do they care? Then, for some reason, the document says that they believe that lolicon/sexy anime figures are still ultimately available for sale in California and throughout the rest of the US, and that they are not liable legally, and that any moral implications should not fall on them. You can really tell they're trying desperately to make themselves look like the underdog heroes in this narrative. It's really gross. The part of the story that you've likely heard about is how these two have claimed that Good Smile owns and operates 4chan. This part of the document is the shortest, but it's also the most batshit insane. Hazumi told Brandon Kim that Good Smile had acquired 4chan and it was being ran in Tokyo, and that Good Smile Japan had created marketing promotions with 4chan in the past. She asked the two of them if they wanted to have a collab with 4chan through a fan design contest using the unofficial 4chan mascot Yotsuba. Brandon Kim refused, because 4chan is a scary, alt-right QAnon den of degenerates, and they are good, upstanding citizens of the United States of America. Then the New Zealand Christchurch shooting happened, and Brand demanded to speak with the CEO of Good Smile Japan, Takanori Aki, regarding 4chan, and they were told to keep quiet about its acquisition. Firstly of all, no. 4chan was sold to Hiroyuki Nishimura in 2015, and he still owns the website. This is very easily disputed with a single Google search. Good Smile has made several Yotsuba figures, but they have never mentioned 4chan in any capacity. She may be the unofficial mascot of the website, but she's also the main character of a massively popular franchise. This claim has no basis in reality. But, according to Polygon, an anonymous source told them that Good Smile is a passive investor in 4chan, which makes way more sense, seeing as how the current owner, Nishimura, was the founder of the massively popular Japanese message board 2chan. The obscenity shit was the more nefarious attempt at character assassination because people in the United States are easily duped by appeals to morality. This one is just embarrassingly transparent in the intent to make Good Smile look horrible and evil. The intent of this countersuit is to make Good Smile look horrible, so when someone searches up the lawsuit against Brandon Kim, instead of seeing their breach of contract, you get Good Smile, pedophiles and owners of the evil website 4chan, to scare normies. The next part is about national origin discrimination, which means they're calling Good Smile racist, or at least nationalist. After pointing out operational issues, including the tax issues, the licensing practices of Good Smile, and their discomfort of Good Smile sales of what they deem lolicon, they noticed that they were being excluded more and more from meetings and that only the Japanese staff were included. At the end of 2019, only their 2 Japanese higher-ups were attending meetings with the Japanese CEO of Good Smile, and Brandon Kim would only be informed later after a decision was already decided. During the COVID lockdowns, the CEO wanted Brandon Kim to fire all employees under OEM, wholesale, and events departments, and instead focus only on Good Smile branded products. They argued for furlough instead of layoffs, and Hozumi shuttered these departments instead and gave the remaining staff furlough except for one Japanese national employee, because of how it would look to their Japanese parent company. Hozumi and Robert Namba continued to work and get paid normally without furlough. It's going to be hard to prove that this was done with the intent of being nationalists, since Hozumi and Namba are both high up on the job hierarchy. Them getting paid normally is kind of the norm for most corporations. In any other time period, I think the case could be made that this was done with the intent. But these were COVID layoffs, everyone was having a hard time, and the US branch of Good Smile would obviously be made up of mostly Western employees. The Japanese national employee being given special treatment is the only thing I can think of that would be amiss in this situation, but they don't really go into detail about that. This next one is a little hard for me to decipher because of all the legalese, but I'll do my best. Retaliation culminating in a pretextual termination. They are mad that she ignored them when they complained about stuff, and she didn't investigate taxes and licensing issues. Next, she stripped them of their authority as vice presidents and made it so they could no longer enter contracts for Good Smile. All contracts would have to be signed by her instead. They were excluded from executive-level meetings and were no longer consulted on major business decisions. They were also prevented from having any contact with the CPAs and attorneys of Good Smile and had no access to company bank accounts. They, in effect, became vice presidents in title only. They also bring up how Hozumi asked them to complain about the managing director of a Good Smile sister company that she wanted to take over, in an attempt to create uncertainty in the other woman's fitness for the position. Good Smile directors caught on to what she was doing, and after investigation, they told her to stop being so confrontational and work with the sister company properly. I assume they told the story to make Hozumi look bad because her bosses told her to stop being such a bitch. But the only part they played in this is that she utilized their ability to bitch and moan in an attempt to get ahead in the company, which is genuinely very funny. They were excluded from meetings, but had to relay information that Hozumi herself did not want to directly, so they were scapegoats. Brandon Kim tried to become independent contractors outside of Good Smile and were denied, because not having any corporate officers on payroll would raise red flags to the state of California, and would make it more difficult for Hozumi and Namba themselves to continue to be paid as independent contractors. Brandon Kim were super butthurt and decided that they could no longer work for Good Smile and preferred to run their own business. After more than 1.5 years of enjoying this, quote, illegal and or offensive, discriminatory, and retaliatory work environment, end quote, deprived of decision-making, Brandon Kim were effectively and or constructively forced to quit. Apparently, Good Smile owed Brandon Kim thousands and thousands of dollars in unreimbursed expenses, unauthorized credit card charges, and held valuable inventory and equipment belonging to MFI Brandon Kim. I've never been bought out before, but I assume that when a company buys your company, that they also buy all the shit in your office. If these things are legally theirs, then they definitely have a legitimate case. If Good Smile was buying shit without your permission with your credit card, then you should have receipts out the ass to take them to task for. I know if I was working for someone and they used my bank account without my knowledge, I would press them on it until they broke. But I am also assuming that they are not lying or misrepresenting the truth of the matter. Since they were banned from the company bank accounts, it could just be them having to pay for shit that used to be covered by their bosses. Either way, obviously, do not take legal advice from me. I don't know. Apparently, when they went to quit, they were held off from resignation for an undisclosed reason. Probably because Good Smile needed those positions filled, plus they probably didn't want to give them back all those office supplies. The last important part of the document is actually about the original lawsuit that Good Smile hit them with in 2020. False accusations, the Netflix opportunity, and expired Valve license. In the document, it says that a friend of Brand's wife was the one who originally got them the connection to the Stranger Things license in the first place, and that's how Good Smile originally acquired the license. But then, after having their resignation on hold, they were approached by the friend of his wife a second time to aid in the production of a Netflix Stranger Things event. A branded drive-in-to experience like the one they initially presented to Hazumi previously. The second collaboration was turned down by Hazumi because she had disbanded Good Smile's other departments, who would have been able to accomplish the event. They accused Good Smile of seeking to enforce an illegal, non-compete clause in its employee handbook, and or pursuant to a non-disclosure agreement, and enjoined Brand, Kim, and MFI from engaging in their professions. Okay, so this is just a big long excuse to try and justify why they broke contract. They made a secondary company while working under Good Smile, which was against company policy because they were quitting anyways. But they were forced to hang around because they wanted all of their stuff from before they were bought out by Good Smile, which I'm assuming was never on the table and they were never going to get. Since Good Smile had worked with Netflix previously, they were officially clients of Good Smile regardless of whether or not they did the second event. Whether or not they knew the person who was contracting them, this is still considered them taking advantage of the company's relationship with Netflix in order to create competing merchandise while they were still working under the company. They read, agreed to, and signed this contract, and they intentionally breached it because they felt like it. You can sympathize with them and understand why they did it, but it still wasn't very smart of them. Quote, they deemed themselves unfairly terminated for no wrongdoing, but rather in relation for signaling their effective resignations in September 2020 after being demoted and downgraded to vice presidents in title only, after making a number of complaints about the legality and ethics of the business operations dictated by Japan, end quote. I thought you guys were quitting. Why do you keep saying unfairly terminated? All you did was complain about having to see sexy anime girls and then complain that they wouldn't let you go. Which is it? Also, in the eyes of the law, breaching contract because you thought the contract was unfair isn't exactly a great defense. I tried reading as many articles about this as I could, but most of them were about the evil and dangerous hacker known as 4chan. Thanks, Polygon and Kotaku. You were just as useless as usual. I did see some statements from them that I didn't see in the legal document, so let's take a little peek at those, shall we? Brandon Kim said that during their employment at Good Smile, they spoke to company leaders to express concern over how certain licensors, like Nintendo, Hasbro, and Disney, would likely distance themselves from the company after seeing these sexy anime figures next to their licensed products. I hate to break it to you guys, but these corporations have collaborated with Good Smile for years. They are very much well aware that these sexy figures exist. You're not blowing the lid off of some sort of secret operation here, boys. Nintendo, Hasbro, and Disney literally do not give a fuck, and will continue to work with Good Smile as long as their products continue to sell. Brandon Kim also recalled an instance where Warner Brothers allegedly contacted Good Smile on behalf of Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins to cease its partnership with the toy maker after Jenkins discovered, quote, sexualized female figures were being sold on the Good Smile website next to the Wonder Woman branded toys, end quote. Are you serious? Do you genuinely expect me to believe this? Of all the things that didn't happen, this is the most didn't happeningest. Like, you genuinely, seriously expect me to believe that Patty Jenkins knows what a fucking anime is? That she even saw the Good Smile website? I can guarantee you that she did not see any of this, and did not contact anyone. Good Smile is not a flawless corporation by any means, and they obviously did a lot of bad things to their employees. But this countersuit is so painful to read as an outsider because of how blatantly it attempts to paint this Japanese company as immoral and disgusting. And I would hope that the judge could be able to see through the bullshit, but America. It's possible that some of these things might stick, but it's also possible that Good Smile will completely shred this entire thing to pieces. All reading this did was make me even more excited for the upcoming Wonder Festival. Wonder Festival is a semi-annual event held in Japan for toy makers. The main attraction are all the skilled artists who make garage kits. But it's also a place where major toy companies showcase a bunch of future releases. Good Smell has already leaked a lot of their upcoming releases, like their JoJo's Bizarre Adventure ones, and I'm so excited. My Jonathan Joestar should be ready to ship out in October, and I have to get ready for the Papyrus pre-order.
Call the police.